try these things instead. We'll see. I'm going to give those some AirPods.
Cool.
Are you there? Can you hear me
Can I say
now?
something? Yes.
Hello? Perfect. Yeah, I can hear you better this way.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, Scott, you can kind of explain, if you'd like to, what Decade is and what you do in a little more detail. I've
Sure.
always just said it was like a strategy system based on data, but you can probably give a better explanation than that.
That's probably a more succinct one than I'll give. Yeah, so I graduated from college back in '96. I've got finance and economics degrees, but I'm never, all the big data stuff is since, before. Oh my God, is this thing going to time out on me? Hold on.
Uh-oh.
We lost the boomer.
Oh no.
No.
Oh,
I had to. It was already trying to time out on me there. That was weird.
Rude.
So I had to just go set that. No, so, I graduated back before big data, so I know how to use Excel and I understand all the math, but like really getting in there and manipulating the ShotLink database really isn't my forte. But what I did back in 2013 and 14 was pretty basic expectation management math, where Chris Como and I have been really good friends for, almost 20 years at this point. And I took all of his ShotLink data, or his rather TrackMan data from whenever we were working together, and all the strokes gain statistics, and basically combined it all together to solve course management. And then, because I've now had surgery on both elbows, I had a cortisone shot back in 2014. Yeah. When I first started trying to use it, and the guy actually paralyzed my right arm. And so that's the whole reason it was crazy. So he gave me this shot, and my arm just curled up like this. And I was like,
oh my God.
what the hell's going on?
I can't even imagine.
No, it was unbelievable. What the craziest part was, like 2 days later, I was just cooking some eggs, and all of a sudden my arm just fell and it just came back to life. It was so bizarre. I wouldn't suggest going through what I went through to feel the feeling, but it was about the coolest feeling ever. But anyways, so as a result, the guy said, don't play any golf for a couple months. You got to let whatever that happened in there heal up. So that's the whole reason. Will Zalatoris was just a junior golfer at my home course here in Dallas at the time. So I called Will up and I said, I did a lot of work that I think is pretty cool. I don't really understand why you don't do better than you do. So let me caddy for you now next week. I can't play. And I caddied for him and he won by 3. And then I went and caddied for him and he won the U.S. Junior 4 weeks later. And then because Jason Enlow and I've been good friends for 30 years, going all the way back to junior and college golf ourselves, he's the SMU head coach at the time. He basically told me, he's like, man, Bryson fires at every single pin and I can't figure out how to get him to stop. But I think what you're doing with Will is something course management related, and it looks a little mathy, which Bryson's going to dig. Can you come teach it to him? So I created an indoor seminar to go teach golf. And it's just kind of funny because, so much of this really is just an accident. But then we've got, we got Bryson signing his NCAA championship shirt. We got the U.S. Open stuff. We got Zalatoris from the U.S. Junior. We've got some women's Augusta, women's amateur too. I'm not sexist. I'm trying to help everyone. So it's been fun because I realized over the last few years, the reason I teach what I teach well is because I was so bad at it when I was playing professionally in my 20s. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've noticed golf attracts a bunch of type A lunatics. I am one, unfortunately. That's why I'm very comfortable saying that to people, because I'm like, look, man, you're not a unicorn. You've never thought anything so crazy that I haven't thought it too. And as a result, I gained a lot of credibility with players typically pretty quickly that way. In the last 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I worked with Adam Schenk for the first time. He went out and finished 3rd, which is his best finish ever. Last week, worked with Keith Mitchell for the first time ever. And it's just fun because... here Keith had missed 7 of his last 11 cuts. He'd played terrible basically the first 2 starts of the year, or scored terrible, I should say.
Watching that man hit golf balls, like Fred and I were down in Sea Island watching him and Grayson get fitted, and I was just like, I have never seen someone hit the golf ball like that.
But so that's where I start with him. His agent called me and he's like, look, I've been talking to Keith a little bit about you, and now I see Adam play well. He's like, I'm just sick of seeing just everybody that when they play, work with you, play well that first week. So I spent just literally an hour and a half on the phone with him. And honestly, with a guy like Keith, I'm just like, I'm not buying it that you're that good with the driver and you literally can't hit a pitching wedge. You're trying too much. The driver's the hard. I don't care what people think. It's the longest, fastest, flattest face club in the bag. I get it. It's got a big face, but it's still the hardest club in the bag to hit.
Yeah.
And here, this guy's one of the best drivers of the golf ball on the planet, and he's literally about 160th every year in strokes gained approach.
Yeah.
You're just trying too much. And it's the same thing as Zalatoris. And it's funny because it sounds offensive, but I mean, literally to guys like that, I just tell them, let's start by not sucking, and then we're going to build from there. And they kind of laugh, but also they can't really call too much of a bluff.
Yeah.
And so when you start there and you do basically the exact same thing with putting, I mean, just people just out there trying to make putts. They're trying to stuff every wedge. And once you kind of get them to see not how it works, it's just not that hard to tidy up
Totally.
a lot of the thought processes. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell me about yourself a little bit, honestly. I mean, I know a little bit about your background, but I mean, tell me, I don't know, where did you play college golf or what? Like, what's your overall story right now? I really don't even know.
So I picked up golf really late. I was actually riding horses competitively before high school from when I was little. My older sister was doing it, and so I wanted to do it. So I was doing that, and I played basketball and a few other sports before high school. And my dad was really into golf, so I had accompanied him to the range and stuff, and been around golf, but I just didn't like it. And when I was going into high school, the head pro, Sean Kelly at my dad's favorite course by our house was like, just so you know, that old like trope about how there's so many unused women's golf scholarships in the world, which like, I don't even really think that's true anymore. But he was like, if your daughter, plays golf decently, she can get a college scholarship. And my dad was like, you're probably not going to get a horse riding scholarship to the school you want to go to. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. And started playing golf at like 13, kind of seriously. I did like first tee and everything, and played through high school, got pretty good. By my junior year, I was averaging like low 80s. And so I was able to get a scholarship to a school called Sonoma State, which is like in San Francisco, Napa Valley area. And I went there it was fun. We went to nationals my sophomore year. I got a lot better there just because I had such a low golf IQ that I was kind of coasting on just being decent at like hitting the ball. And my coach, when I got there, was like, here's a little bit of strategy. Like, maybe you should think before you hit these shots. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. So that's what kind of first sparked my interest in like hacking golf courses, like finding a way to work through them instead of just like hitting it and hoping. And then I transferred to University of Nevada, Reno, and I was there for 3 years. So I played for them, and I graduated in 18. And before I left, I talked to my coach because she had been on the LPGA, probably 20 years ago. And I just asked her like, hey, I'm thinking about going pro. I really like playing golf. I think that I could do it. Like, what are your thoughts? And she just encouraged me and said, yeah, I think you have the demeanor for it. I think you should definitely try it. Like, there's no reason not to play for a year and see if you hate it. So I was like, okay. So I didn't turn pro until 2019. And I played a full schedule on that women's all pro tour, which is like the Symetra feeder tour. And then I went to Q school that year and got Symetra status. And then 2020 happened. And I literally did not play a competitive tournament in 2020. I just had lost all my sponsors and like potential sponsors. So I had no money. So I was just practicing that year. And then once things kind of got going again in 2021, I started playing some events, got into a Symetra event. And that's kind of where we stand right now. But the reason I know about Decade is because I've done a lot of work with John Tattersall in Atlanta. I don't know if you know him personally, but he's big into Decade.
I think we've met once or twice around the way.
Yeah, so he's really big into all that stuff and the data. So he helped me a lot with like, this is something I don't think a lot of people recognize about Decade when they first start learning about it, is like the emotional part of it and how your expectations being lower will actually make you play better. Because being type A, I was very like perfectionist on the golf course. And if I missed a putt that I thought I should make, or, made a bogey, I was like, oh, it's over. Like, I'm horrible at golf. I'm playing bad. And then I would bogey like 4 holes in a row. So the expectation thing of like, you're not going to make 30 footers, you're not always going to make 20 footers has been huge.
I mean, there's just certain, just basic facts, and it's so interesting. I really do wish that I could unknow what I know to go back into to my 20s and figure out like what did I actually think back then, because I was a pretty good ball striker and a pretty terrible putter, you know, so I thought, and I definitely was probably Zalatoris. I mean, honestly, hit the ball really well, really long, and just was trying to do way too much where you're just out there trying to make birdies on every single hole, and it's so interesting how you can just use the data to chill out. And again, we're talking here at the professional level, but even so people understand, like as your scoring average drops from 95 to 79, out of those 16 shots of improvement, only one of them is from an increase in birdies. The rest is by avoiding mistakes. And even then for the good players here to realize that as your scoring average drops through the 70s, 70 to 80% of your improvement is from avoiding bogeys, not by making more birdies. And even then at the professional level, every single round of golf you ever play, you finish and think, I should have shot lower. I mean, 100% of rounds. And those are always from these things that what we call the Tiger 5 in decade, these 5 things that Tiger tracked, which was how many bogeys did he have on par 5s, how many blown easy saves, how many 3-putts, how many doubles, and how many bogeys on par 5s. I said that one first. Bogeys with 9-iron or less. Okay. And so when you think about Tiger out there in his prime, tracking stats, and he's just like, how many dumb things did I do? And he's literally, again, it's tough because I don't want players to feel like they're out there just tiptoeing around on eggshells. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much what they need to feel like, because you're everyone, tour players included. Again, Keith Mitchell, that was my advice to him. Stop trying to make birdies. Stop doing the stupid mistakes. And next thing you know, I didn't expect him to shoot 18 under through 36 holes last week. But I was like, there you go, dude. You're telling me you're playing good. I believe you. Now go show me, and just try to not do dumb stuff, and trust the birdies will be there. And that's the hardest part ultimately, because even like tour players, they birdie 3.5 holes around. 1.5 of those are par 5s. They've got some wedges each day, and then they make a 20-footer every other day on average, and they've got a 7-iron. They weren't really aiming at the flag. They happened to pull or push. Happen to being the key word. You know, you and Fredrik, I can assure you, the main thing I think I did wrong in my 20s was I think I probably picked decent targets, maybe 5 yards left of the pin, and then I'd hope I push it. Yeah. And that's where the outliers come from. I truly believe the more and more that I do this, that the outliers come from you not knowing exactly what you want to do with any given shot, and or actually hoping you don't hit your target, which is, it's so stupid. Like, it's so dumb, it's unbelievable, and we all do it. I mean, you've never once stood on a driving range and thought, if I can just miss my target by like 15 feet, that's awesome. Yeah. And then we do that like 7 times around. And that's, I really do. I really believe that that's where all the outlier shots come from. I mean, because I consider my simulator, and obviously we're off turf. I just never hit a shot as bad as you see tour players hit on par 3s, where they're all off of a tee and they're all off of a flat piece of grass. That's the only reason I always use those as examples. I'm 48. I'm not a member at a country club. I don't play golf. I refuse to believe I could hit it better than a tour player, which obviously I can't. But that's what you just have to understand. It's all these little pieces of patience and everything. They're just sitting all around the ground. You just have to just pick up and tuck away in your pocket and not freak out.
Yeah, and I feel like the other thing that's very misleading, because being a pro and like hanging out with other pros, and especially seeing Fred and all of the guys on the Canadian and Latin tours and stuff, like you never see bad shots on TV, and you always see those shots that are like close to the pin, or someone sticks a wedge and like spins it back to 4 feet. And when I talk to amateurs, they're like, oh no, like Bryson has a wedge in on every single hole because he overpowers every golf course. He aims at every pin and he spins it so much that it stops right next to the flag. And I'm just like, I don't see that. Like, I watch people play, but I do not see that. And even that tweet that I sent out about watching Fred at Q School a few weeks ago, like all of these guys had a plan to specifically aim away from pins at this golf course because the greens were really firm. It was a little bit windy. The pins obviously were in scary places. And I just thought it was incredible that for over 4 days of some of the best golfers I've ever been around, no one was aiming at pins.
Well, and that's honestly, so we've all seen the Curtis Strange interview with Tiger when Tiger first turned pro, and Tiger's like, you know, second sucks and third is even worse. And Curtis is just like, oh, you'll learn. But also in that interview, Curtis was talking about, like, you know, where do you feel like you've learned how to play golf? And Tiger said, well, last year at the US Open, I was paired with Nick Price, and Nick shot 66 in the first round. He was leading. We were having lunch afterwards, and I asked Nick how many pins he fired at that day, and he said, like, one. He's like, I thought that was really weird, because here I was firing at every single one of them. Came out, played the next day, same thing, finished, and he was like, I didn't aim at any today. And Tiger's like, dude, I fired at every pin again today. And I honestly believe that just nonchalant little offhanded comment that Nick Price made is what got Tiger thinking, because you can crush junior and amateur golf when you've got his physical skill set, even while playing like a moron. You know, he's just that much better than everyone. And you see it now. I really think you're seeing it now, where those top 5 wagger amateurs on both sides, like when they turn pro, they're pretty much ready to go. Like it's rare those people don't make it if you had it for any length of time. And, you know, so Tiger was going to be able to crush amateur golf, but I don't know that he would have done what he did, because what's funny to me is when you ask somebody, like, who are the two best players of all time? It's going to be either Jack or Tiger. Who are the 2 best course managers of all time? It's pretty much going to be Jack or Tiger. And yet, historically, we haven't had like an organized system of how to think strategically. And I think that really gets back to the fact that golf is the only sport in the world that's not played on a uniform field of competition. All I do is spend my life arguing on Twitter with golf course architecture lovers, but I'm also trying to, like, respect them. I'm like, y'all do a good job. You're what makes the game work. Because, you know, if I tell you that I was playing basketball and I was at the top of the key and the 2 guards switched onto me from the low, like, you kind of have assuming I know what I'm talking about, you kind of have a general idea of what happened. But if I tell you I was 147 on number 1, should I fire at the pin? Like, well, I'm going to need a lot more information than that.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with golf. And with, honestly, with even teaching golf, is it takes 4 hours to go play golf. And it's just, first of all, even if you went and got a playing lesson with an assistant pro or somebody, there's not even a guarantee that what they were going to tell you was correct anyways.
Yeah.
But let alone, you're also not just going to get out there with your instructor very often. And so you do see a lot of the better players just happen to grow up. Tony Finau just happens to be around a lot of players,
Totally.
you know, younger players. You get a lot of that now, where you just get, you know, I'm going to say success breeds success, but these kids are learning how to play from the next, you know, the older generation. And now Decade really systematizes that thought process perfectly. And again, getting back to, you think you're type A, I literally went through 20,000 of Tiger's shots by hand, because once I got started, I was like, this is kind of interesting. Once I got access to ShotLink, and I did like a tournament, and I was like, holy shit, that's pretty cool. I did another tournament. Next thing you know, I spent 6 months looking through 3 years by hand of golf shots of his. Again, I need a better hobby or something. But again, I don't know where any one shot is aimed. But when you go look at 20,000, a pretty clear pattern emerges. And again, I'd already done the math to solve course management. And Tiger's strategy basically just mirrored it perfectly, which is crazy, because he just somehow figured it out, again, after Nick Price. And I was talking to Claude Harmon one day, and I was complimenting his dad, and he was like, dude, Tiger taught Butch everything. And I was like, really? I really just always assumed your dad was a great instructor. He's like, no, my dad's made a living off of teaching everyone else what Tiger taught him. And I'm like, well, congrats. And he's like, I don't know how he figured it out either. Now, that's probably Claude being a little bit humble for his dad, but anytime if you go look into YouTube or anywhere and look for Butch Harmon's stuff, you won't find swing theory. You'll find how to score and play golf, which is not surprising, considering he's one of the better instructors of all time.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't surprise me all that much, because everyone I know who's worked with Tiger or been around him a lot says that of all of the talent that he has, like, his golf IQ is unbelievable. And he just knows so much about himself and just how golf works in general. So, I mean, it's just crazy to me that like small statement bothered him enough to like go master that and study that. But that sounds very Tiger.
But also, when you start getting to the type A, like, the rest of us are type A in the wrong things. Like, we think we can perfect our golf swing, which, you know, that was a big problem for Tiger also, trying to perfect his swing. But if you look at, you know, his mom and his dad and going all the way back to birth, I was so excited when thank God the car wreck wasn't a day before and he actually got to play with Jada Pinkett Smith, because when she asked him about meditation, she's like, well, you know, tell me about that. And he's like, you know, I meditate all the time. She's like, well, when did you start? And he was like, when I was born. And I'm like, finally, He said it in public that this has been his part of his routine. So you take a guy like that. I spend all day telling everyone to meditate. How often do I do it? Like once or twice a week. It should be. And I tell everyone, it's the most important thing you can do for 10 minutes every day, assuming you're doing it correctly. And, you know, Tiger just, I guarantee you that dude didn't miss a beat, you know, probably prior to getting himself in a little bit of personal trouble. I feel like he probably got a little scattered there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But let's say like 2006 and before, I feel like that was a huge part of his life. But to be perfectly honest, also, you can see it in 2019 also. Like at the Masters, that dude is in another zone with the meditation as he's out there winning the Masters again. It was incredible.
But not only like, I mean, 2009, I'm sure overwhelmed him quite a bit, but to be able to come back from just like the outside pressures of that takes quite a bit of mental toughness. Just people, because I can't even imagine like going through that publicly and then trying to come back and be like, oh, everybody root for me. Like, I know you literally all hate me, but so, I mean, it's pretty impressive either way.
I sure wouldn't want my text messages publicized and then have to go out in front of the entire world and be like, yeah, no, I said that.
For real.
It would not be good. So, yeah, I actually agree with that. There was a part of me that was like, this guy's going to tuck his tail and never show his face in public again.
That would have been easier.
That would have been easier.
Yeah.
Well, so and then to grab the chip yips and just everything else. And Como the whole time, he's like, dude, I'm telling you, it's not a yip. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And literally Como's like, I promise you it's mechanical. We got something we're working on. And sure enough, he was right. I did not think that dude would ever break 80 again. I, unfortunately, now as a 48-year-old, I kind of know what a little bit of a putting yip feels like.
Oh.
I would not want a 3-foot putt to win anything in front of him. I'm better now, but the fact that Tiger, and the one that he hit, he had a chip shot over the bunker on 11 one day with the lake long, and he just nipped it perfectly. And I was like, wow, there's no way on earth any other human could have hit that shot given the history that he has.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just incredible in my opinion.
Everything about him is insane.
It really is, actually.
It really is. When you are looking at like pro data versus amateur data, I know one of your things is that it's not about making birdies, it's about bogey avoidance most of the time. So I have always been kind of wondering about this because I've always been a decent putter, but the best golf that I've played has been when my ball striking has been really on. And everybody acts like, you know, putting is so important and they say putt for dough, but I just haven't really seen that in my own game. So I'm wondering, according to your data and like all the info that you've gathered, is ball striking making the biggest difference, or what is it that makes the biggest difference? Ball striking
is by far the most important thing. And again, this is where I look back at my own playing career, where I won 10 times on the Hooters tour and essentially every tour besides the one you actually want to win on. And I striped it. I mean, I was a great ball striker. That's the US Open that I played in right there. I was dead last in the field in total putts with 36 both days. Not impressive. But what's funny is there, I thought that I was just a terrible putter, and I would just go work on my stroke. Again, now I unfortunately know what a yip feels like. So I know I didn't have it back then. Yeah. I could do that little drill with 2 tees and get the putter. I could do that perfectly. And in hindsight, if you can get it through that gate, your line is for sure good enough. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And so then what I always try to tell people, like in my seminars, if you hit a putt with any break, if you hit it too soft, it starts breaking sooner. If you hit it too hard, it starts breaking later. So if I have a dead straight putt, the only thing that matters is, I mean, your speed matters a little bit, but how good is your line? And most people's lines are going to be good enough. But then once I kick any break on it at all, even given the identical start lines and read, your speed winds up making your shot pattern wider, which is what exactly your make rate is essentially based on. And back to that US Open, the reason I brought it up is on Wednesday, Vijay Singh came walking out on the putty green, and he was known at the time as the most prolific practicer, and I was just a Hooters tour guy, so I was like, all right, old man, I'm about to out-practice you. Yeah. And I just sat there and didn't pay attention to what I was doing and just randomly rolled balls all around the green, BS with Fred Couples and Chad Campbell, and was just and then he finally left 2.5 hours later, and I walked off like, told you I was going to out-practice you. Shockingly, I was dead last in the field in putting. And I won't say that VJ is a great guy to hold up as a putting metric, But the guy made about $80 million more than I did because he at least was functional while having a massive yip. And it's because he sat on the side of the green and did speed drills for 2.5 hours and didn't talk to a single human being. Yeah. I'm just kind of screwing off. And that's just everything. It is all about paying attention, but then understanding and having some productive speed drills. You know, so whether you're using the speed drills from the Decade app or whatever is fine, but find some putting speed drills that you want. And literally that is all you should be doing. That's why I've got here in my new simulator, I've got this 35-foot well putt mat. Mm-hmm. And that's solely so I can just do speed drills. And it runs at 11, and I will just own a 35-foot and shorter speed. And if you can do that, the rest of it's just not that hard. Again, it's just not that hard to kick it on a functional line. And then it's just about having a speed. I try to explain to people, like, if you've got a swarm of bees, and as it's breaking, if your speed's bad, your swarm gets bigger, which is just going to make the hole intersect with fewer bees. The tighter you can keep the bees together, which again is not going to be from your line, it's going to be from your speed. That's really just all that it takes. And it's just actually not that hard to do either.
Yeah, I get a lot of complaints when I ask people on here, like, what do you struggle with? And they'll say, oh, green reading is so hard. And I'm always confused because I'm like, I know that you're not that bad. Like, everyone can see slope. You're going to have a general idea of where the ball is going to fall to. So I'm like, are you actually bad at reading greens, or is your start line bad, or are you like, your speed is all over the place? Because I generally play better when I have decent speed, and then you can make it everyone can make a 3-footer. So if you can get it to 3 feet.
But even if you can't make a 3-footer, you only on tour, you have 2.6 of those around. Mm-hmm. So even if you're 10% worse than tour average, which is absolutely horrific, like it's literally impossible to be more than 10% worse. If you only have 2.5 of those around and you're 10% worse, it's only a quarter of a shot. A quarter of a shot matters, but it's also what's more important is missing a 4-foot putt and moving on. And not taking that with you to the next 4-foot putt, because now you're in your head and be like, well, that was my one to miss today. Yay, now move on. And that's, again, what the make rate from 4 feet on the PGA Tour is 88%. But that's 3 foot 1 inch to 4 foot. Yeah. Like, that's not even a 4-foot putt. That's a 3.5-foot putt is 88%. That's just not very long. And, you know, back to your question of drive for show, putt for dough, I'm really lucky and glad because it kind of gave me a timestamp on being the first guy, in my opinion, thinking about all this stuff. There's an online poker forum named 2+2 that I post under the handle Ship This, which I wrote a thread back in 2011 that was titled, Is Drive for Show, Putt for Dough Really True? And I was just using the only stats they had released at that point were the strokes gained putting stats. And just as I was looking, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I understand these numbers and they just aren't mind-boggling. And then again, as you really start investigating and understanding, it's just the fact that 32 feet is where they average 2 putts to hole out, the fact that nobody really makes that many putts from 15 to 22 or 3 feet, the fact that you've got to leave 30-ish% of your putts short from only 15 to 20 feet. Otherwise, you're hitting them too hard and you're not going to make the appropriate amount. And you're going to 3-putt some. Like, that's, again, it's crazy to take a guy like Keith Mitchell, who in his first 2 events of the year, 4 rounds, was -2 strokes gained putting per round. And it's like, I mean, dude, unless you got a yip, like, I hate using that word right out of the blocks, but unless you got a yip, man, that's impossible. And he's like, I definitely don't have a yip. I'm like, well, then you need to work on your speed because that's literally impossible to be that bad. And, you know, he goes out and does some speed drills. He had his putting coach out there with him last week also. They talked through all this stuff, and it's like, you need to leave a quarter of your putt short from 15 feet. Otherwise, you're not doing it right.
But, like, I remember in college when I would be, you know, playing in pro-ams or fundraisers or like whatever it was. And if you leave a birdie putt in the heart a few inches short, people count that as like a really bad putt. I'm like, I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. It's a tap in, let's go.
I mean, it is. It's 25 feet in college. D1 college golf is where they average 2 shots to hole out. And so technically, I mean, it would be about 15 feet probably, where if they could just leave every putt 1 inch short, I mean, from 15 feet all the way to 100 feet, they should take that. You would never make a 16-footer again, but you'd never 3-putt again. Yeah. And I think that basically every single golfer in college would be better. And it really does.
They would take that. If you took a poll, I think they would all just
no chance they wouldn't. No
maybe,
chance.
yeah.
No one would do that.
Yeah,
Everyone would
that,
say,
I
I'm
don't
a
know.
bird. No way.
I'd be pretty happy with no three putts for an entire year. That would be
yeah.
pretty nice.
The Ivy Leagues, but again, this is what's interesting is you should be 3-putting 2.5% of the time. Like that's about what there's an optimal number there, and it's not 0,
Yeah.
oddly.
Yeah.
So getting that 3-putt rate to 2.5%, that's one every other day. I mean, it's not much, but it does happen. But again, if you just do some of these speed drills, getting your speed better is just not very difficult to do.
Totally.
It just takes focused effort. I really do think I've got a video in the Decade app titled The Art of Putting. And it's just because I think that just understanding what makes great putters great, like no one ever knew before. I mean, even Brad Faxon, like I got into a tussle with him on Twitter a year ago because Brad said on a podcast, when I'm putting my best, I have to mark the comebackers. I didn't see it. Somebody tagged me and was like, what do you think of that, Scott? And I'm like, sounds to me like Brad doesn't know how he putted. And Brad, I'm just kind of trying to joke. It fell about as flat as it should have. And Brad's like, do you think you're gonna tell me how to putt? And I'm like, well, apparently yes. Like, shit, here we go. But then you can just use the data and be like, here it is. I mean, again, Brad, you left 25 to, I don't remember the exact number, but it was right what I told him, 25 to 30% of his putts from 20 feet short.
Yeah.
And it's just, the reason I take issue with it, not because, I mean, Brad's a good guy. I think we've buried the hatchet at this point, but I don't want college golfers and junior golfers hearing Brad Faxon, literally the best putter-ish that's ever walked the planet, say, essentially, I jam my putts in. Because I know that's not correct. And, it's just understanding that, again, I start my seminar off by saying, winning requires luck. Stop trying to make birdies and stop trying to make putts. And that is the exact same thing that I start every conversation with tour players with. I mean, it doesn't even matter because you just have to understand there's going to be some little lucky breaks that happen in order for you to win a golf tournament. Any putt you make over about 7 feet had some element of luck to it. And when you're trying to make birdies, it's when you go out there and you make all the dumb mistakes with wedges and gap wedges, trying to do too much or trying to jam a 15-footer in. And those are just all the mistakes that are so easy to cover up.
I don't know if you have any data on this, but I was watching a video. Fred showed me a video the other day of that perfect, what is that thing called where you drop the ball and it rolls?
The perfect putter.
Yeah, somebody was rolling that and they did 4 putts in a row.
I've got the sweet roll,
Yeah.
Sorry.
So somebody did 4 of those in a row and they all had slightly different breaks. And I don't know, is there data on how much of a difference you can have in a putt between with the same line with the same speed? Because he missed 4 putts.
They all depends on the condition of the green, obviously.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, there is, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is, and I feel like it's going to matter on the speed of the greens and the severity of the slope and all kinds of other asterisks. But a reasonable putt, a reasonable 10 or 15 foot putt, it was there's only a 1 foot window of the potential speeds that will make it on any given line. Otherwise, it starts catching the high or the low lip. And again, I'm really pulling that number out of my butt, but I think it's something in there on a reasonable putt from a reasonable length. But going back to what you were talking about earlier about people saying they suck at reading greens, a couple of years ago, I really just haven't played much golf in the last 6 years, but a couple of years ago, I had played a little bit and I wanted to play more golf, but there was no amateur golf tournaments I could get in since I don't have an amateur resume at all. So I just entered Q school as a 46-year-old amateur, which was about as pointless as you would think. I wanted to see how quickly I could throw away $5,400 apparently. But I shot 11 under for the 7 rounds, but I didn't even bend down to read putts because my knee kind of hurt. And so as I was walking up to the green, I'm not kidding, as I was walking up to the green, I would just kind of observe where the hole was, and I would have a general opinion it's okay slope, or why did they put it there? And so then when I would read the putt, it would be anywhere between that's an okay slope would be a 1. Why did they put it there was a 3, like an aim point parlance. I didn't even bend down to read, and I'd just be like, yeah, that's for sure breaking. Yeah, it's for sure breaking left. It's nothing crazy. That's a 1.5. And I was a dead 0 strokes gained putter for the 7 rounds that I played. Literally did not read a putt.
Yeah. So I've worked with John Tattersall for a long time, and I improved a lot when he told me to try less. I've always, in the beginning, try to be super focused on the line, try to be super focused on lining up correctly and everything. And he said, literally, you barely even have to read it. You're going to know kind of what the ball is going to do. Try less, hit it up there with the right speed. And for some magical reason that you have already kind of figured out, I became a better putter by being less precise. And it was pretty impressive. Now I still line up short putts, but it's not, it's not, if it's a little bit off, I don't freak out and I go back and align it again. I'm like, okay, it's not an exact line, but it's kind of a general direction of where I want to start the putt. And I kind of did the same with my approach play. I tried to be a little bit less exact on the lines. We talked a lot about dispersion instead of, because before my aim was always just a straight line, right? Now I'm trying to move my circle, which is exactly what you guys are doing. So even, we were hitting balls in TrackMan on the range, which obviously it's a lot easier than on the golf course. Because for a flat lie every time, so your dispersion is going to be smaller, but it still showed me my dispersion. So let's say it's, I don't know, you know this. What is a normal dispersion left to right with a 7-iron on tour? Do you?
Oh, I mean, in play or on a range?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Let's say it's on the range then. Let's say
on the range, 7-iron, 20-ish yards, maybe a shade higher than that.
So let's say it's 25 on the course then. So he was like, okay, the pin is 5 from the left edge. You can't aim to it because half of your shots is outside the green, and you're making bogeys or risk of it. So when I started thinking like that, and especially not only left to right, but also long and short, that was the big one. He explained to me literally a front pin can be the toughest pin on the course.
Not can be, is.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, every single time.
Is,
I mean,
so,
in my tour packet every single week, I literally put slides in that says, "Stop, y'all suck to front hole locations" every single time, because I want them to just get that message loud and clear. Well,
and it was incredible to me. So when I stopped pushing, it's I did meters. So let's say it was 130 to the front, instead of trying to hit a hard, wedge, try to get it 130, and if I miss it, it's 120 plugged in the lip of the bunker. Hit something that actually flies 135, and if you flush it, you're 5 yards past. It is what it is. But if you miss it, you're still on the front.
Lou, the guy that I had doing my data work for me for a few years, because he is really good at manipulating the ShotLink database, he did a great study where he showed from 160 to 180 on the PGA Tour to front hole locations, they hit 57% of the greens. To back hole locations, same length shot, they hit 71. They hit 14% fewer greens in regulation in the same distance bucket. And I'm not talking like a 3-iron here. I'm talking like an 8 or a 9-iron. Like, not that hard of a shot to hit solid. People always want to say, well, they don't hit it solid. Like, they're hitting it pretty damn solid from 165. I mean, that is entirely because everybody's playing for this 80th percentile shot. So, tour players, they love joking, laughing about it. They're like, oh my God, these amateurs on Wednesday have no clue how far they hit it. And I literally, I tee them up for that. And I'm like, cool, you don't either. And then you just show them their front greens and regulation percentages. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, there really are things that I do for my tour players that I hesitate saying like this, because it's like, that's one of the ways my players are kicking everyone's butts, is just by not sucking to front hole locations. I really think that the strokes gained baselines are going to change over the next 3 to 5 years as people understand this stuff better, and scores are going to, drop. What you're seeing this last weekend is going to become more and more common because the guys are correctly hitting driver everywhere. Number one's 380 at the summit, and half the guys are just shipping driver. Like, I don't know, let's just send it up there and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
That's the key. Good.
Yeah, when you ask amateurs, every front pin is an easy pin, right? Like, the pin was so easy on number 3 today. It was right there in the front. Shorter. Yeah, so but that's the biggest mindset. When I talk to some of the players I coach a lot of short game, and it's the same thing. Like, the main goal is not having to chip and pitch or hit bunker shot. So how do I get better? Well, have less bunker shots. And it's crazy. Instead of having a bunker shot, have a 40-foot putt down the hill. I promise you your percentage is better to get that one up and down than having a 5-yard bunker shot. But
that's when I catch so much grief from people saying that what I teach is common sense. I'm like, I don't disagree with that once you see it.
Yeah.
Once you see it, like, well, this is obvious. It is. Then why do I have 40 people on the PGA Tour that I work with?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I'm not doing anything for them other than teaching them some course management and some mindset around it. Like, that's it.
I get, like, I understand what they're saying with common sense, but that doesn't mean it's common knowledge. Like,
well, and the other thing on that too is just common sense ain't so common, is it? I mean,
No.
again,
No,
it's
but
just.
I think the only way that you get your point across is doing what you're doing. You
Mhm.
can't just you have to literally piss some people off for them to see it, you know, because it's, okay, it's a tough pin, so aim away from it. Oh, that's common sense. It's like, bro, you would have gone straight for that front pin with a wedge in your head every
100%.
single day. Don't tell me that's common sense to aim 10 yards past it and you know, play for maybe a non-optimal, you know, strike or whatever. So it's definitely not common sense.
Yeah, and I just always want Tron. Okay, if it's common sense, then will you call Keith Mitchell last week and just tell him everything he doesn't know is common sense and see if he finishes third?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Just let me know. I mean, it really is sometimes. It really is super easy sometimes to just talk people into playing well because, again, I'm not a unicorn. I know the crazy stuff you're thinking out there and what you're actually trying to do, and I know that it's not going to pan out. I mean, I had one comment I was going to say earlier. One of the things that I really, over the next 2 years, as I try to get my game back in shape for the Champions Tour, I really want to try to not read greens on a daily basis, yet track my strokes gained putting, so that way I'll have confidence when I get into a golf tournament to not read putts there either. Because even just playing the little bit that I do now, it's so easy to fall back into trying too hard. Again, we're all lunatics. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm going to try to guard against and like actually have structured how little I'm paying attention or trying in certain aspects in the game in order to just like journal and like, Scott, you're not trying when you're putting. Don't try just because all of a sudden now. Yeah, don't start trying because it's Champions Tour. Cuse can be like, yeah, it looks like it's a little bit outside the right and hit it. Cross your fingers, see what happens.
It's weird. Like when I wasn't pro yet, but I caddied for Fred in Latin Tour Q school when we had first started dating, and John kind of like took me to the side and was like, he is going to aim, we're going to take very conservative targets and he's going to swing aggressively at those. But it was like the whole idea was that Fred trying to control less of where the ball went and having a larger area that he knew he could hit it somehow made it easier to hit his target, when like my brain works the opposite way. Like I'm always trying to nail down the tiniest thing and plan for the Earth's rotation, and like every single little thing needs to be accounted for, which is not a good way to play tournament golf. And it's exhausting. Like it's so exhausting.
I think that most importantly is even if you had a perfect golf swing, golf is played outdoors. Unless you are literally can somehow predict the exact wind, unless you're actually doing, like if you're in a golf tournament, unless you're actually doing the Pythagorean theorem in your head for hole locations, the hole location is approximately how far you think it is. Unless you have actual elevation, like it's all approximate. And the quicker that you can understand and most importantly accept that, the easier it gets, because that's what's so funny is like if you're in the left side of the fairway and the pin's on the back left, well, the sprinkler head goes to the front of the green and then up, and then the pin will be shorter than that number for sure. The opposite is the case if you're on the left and the pin's on the back right, exact same problem exists, but now you've got the Pythagorean theorem working against you. The pin's a couple yards further than you think, and it's like you just don't know. And as a result, even if you were perfect, you can't play perfectly just because of all the stuff outside. I mean,
the lie is a whole thing, and oh my gosh,
it's the biggest outdoor sport played with the ball in the air the longest of any sport in the world. Like you just don't have much control over where it's going. And once you understand and accept that, I mean, again, the reason that I do enjoy teaching this so much is because I was so bad at it. And I literally was, I mean, that's the one thing I know Tron's like they have a private forum on how much they hate me, which is awesome with no laying up. But Tron's in there saying, I've just heard he's a total psychopath when he was in his 20s. I'm like, no shit. I'm the one that told you I was. Like, I was a lunatic. Yeah, I played in the US Open. I also was threatened with a $5,000 fine because I buried my 3-wood. I'm aware I was an idiot. Like, duh.
We all wanted to.
I know,
but now I'm not, and I'm not now because of the data, because of the shot link images. And then that's all that I try to teach people is like, you don't have to be crazy.
I know Hannah's been working a lot on her speed, and we see everyone working on speed nowadays.
You mean like swing speed?
Swing speed, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you kind of proven how important driving is, and the distance part is kind of what's, you know, I mean, I play with, you know, younger pros all the time, and everyone nowadays, if you don't swing it close to 125, you're behind the A-ball now. Like before, if you swing it 120, you were like bombing. John Summers is absolutely sending it. And all of a sudden now, everyone are at around 120 is average. I feel like, you know, everyone's at 120.
Again,
you know?
I still see people quoting these TrackMan numbers. The average tour swing speed's like 112. I'm like, not from the people that are doing any good. I mean,
no
it's.
sense.
I do think, and you know, again, Como, you know, little Como's living room lab. He lives basically across the street from me. So I kind of knew what he and Bryson were up to. We talked a little bit about it, the speed and everything. There was a 6 or 9 months of work going into it before then they really started swinging hard. You've got to get your body ready for it. I do think that just going with deadlifts and just really understanding that the lower body is a huge part of the engine, but then just understanding how to use the ground. I mean, I've got a deal that I've been working on personally where like I swing, like I don't get up on my toes or anything. And I'm trying to, from the top, like really feel like I'm dropping. Now I'm not at all. But once you do that and you can feel, I can't tell you how much more speed I can feel coming up out of the ground.
If you have something to push against.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
That's something in my swing that I'm definitely working on is I do tend to really get up on my toes at impact and even a little bit after. And a lot of people, when I was first learning, were like, "Oh, it's good to be up on your toes. Like that's a power accumulator."
But it
like,
is after.
But like you can't use the ground if you have literally nothing pushing on the ground. Like the smallest part of my foot is touching the ground, and I'm supposed to push. It's not.
We've maxed out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's. I mean, honestly, like I do all these yoga classes with these fit 50-year-old women who are just absolutely decimating me in body weight exercises. And I don't know the physics of it all, but I assume, I mean, I'm 215, but I mean, again, I'm sure I'm stronger than you, but it's also probably not as much proportionally to where you're able to accidentally get off the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas even though I'm stronger than you, I can't get off the ground just because I'm 215 pounds. Yeah, that's why a guy like Justin Thomas is, you know, up on his feet. I don't know if Justin weighed another 30 pounds, if that would slow him down or speed him up. But I mean, again, you just look at what Bryson did. I can't believe how much weight that guy was able to put on.
That's
I mean, I just remember texting with Como during the Masters because that's when I saw Bryson saying that his tum-tum was hurting. I'm like, Como, you can't have 3 of those shakes a day.
Like,
there's
no
sugar.
shit, your stomach's hurting, dude.
Like,
I know.
Do we actually have to tell you can't have 60 grams of sugar alcohol without getting the shits?
Oh, you're not going to feel good, my guy.
Yeah, it's weird that didn't pan out.
But what's cool now is that now people actually practice it. Like before, you were either fast or you weren't. Now everyone is actually trying to get fast.
One of my things, so I built this in my house. I built this simulator here, and I literally just today finally, I was like, you know what, I got to get back after it. So I had to, because I've had this dust in my house. I've got all my weights in my shower and upstairs, but I've got, that's literally, I cleaned all those things off today so I can take that hex bar and start getting back after it, because it really is just a function of getting stronger. I mean, and you do that by, again, you don't have to sit in there and kill yourself in the gym. I'm going to put about 350 pounds on that thing. I'm going to pick it up about 20 times a day, and that's about all I'm going to do. And it will result in speed, period.
Yeah, we hung out with Chris Kirk at the Waste Management last year, and he had gained quite a bit of speed and distance, and we were kind of asking him, like, why, how did you do it? He was like, oh, I started working out a little bit more, and Fred was like, oh, so were you doing, like, explosive stuff? And he's like, no, all I do is trap bar deadlifts. Like, I literally just do heavy trap bar deadlifts, and now I'm swinging it faster. And we were like,
but also trying to swing it faster.
Yeah.
Like, he's legit, like, I talked to a few of my friends. Maurice Allen is a friend of mine. When I lived in Atlanta, I spent some time with him, and he's like, legit, you swing harder. Like, just hit 30 balls a day, swinging it as hard as you can, and you're going to get faster. You know, you don't have to do it all the time, but if you start swinging faster, you're going to get faster. And it's quite an incredible, when I started doing that, I didn't hit it that much more offline. It's just
when I entered Q School 2 years ago, like it was the first time I'd gone out and I was back down to like 114 in club head speed, and I'm playing with all these young guys. And I used to be probably 122 or 3. I used to blow up by everyone in my 20s. It was the first time I kind of left dejected, like, oh man, I don't hit it as far, and I just refused to accept it, which is why then I bought another 100 pounds in deadlift weights to throw on that bar, and just that's all I did. And I'm telling you, over about 2 months, just by going, I literally just overnight, because I'm like, well, I'm just doing deadlifts, and I'm like, well, you're not really trying. But those 2 red plates are 50 pounds each, put those on, like, holy shit, this thing's a lot heavier. Did that for 2 months and did nothing else, and got about 4 or 5 miles an hour in club head speed back. I mean, it's just crazy. Incredible. It really is. But it takes some effort, shocker.
I said, you hang out with Chris Comer there. We've all seen his living room, obviously. Yeah. But do you know do you have any type of insights on what he's doing with his players to get them faster? Do they have like a workout plan, or?
It's all highly personalized. I mean, I wish I had a good answer to that, but you know, it really is all personalized. I mean, so Bryson, you could see him like he's trying to throw everything up and then down. You can see everybody just trying to get a little bit bouncier and squattier. I haven't seen Jason Day, what he's been working on, or if his swing looks like it's changing at all or anything. So, you know, Comer's an interesting guy. I try not to pepper him with too many specific questions about guys, because I don't want to get him in too much trouble, because I've got loose lips. So I try not to know as much as I can about him.
Yeah, it's good, because we work out with Ando as a personal trainer. He's great, but it's true, because obviously the way I work out is going to be very different to Hannah. She's extremely flexible. I'm not. So, you know, the kind of balance there of getting a lot stronger but still having some kind of range of motion is obviously important. Compared to Hannah, she can just kind of get after it.
I had like too much range of motion. Like I tended to get so long and be so elastic that I like couldn't fire. So it's weird. It's weird how much difference there is.
Well, but if you don't have like the connection, again, like when you've got, you know, when you are hyper flexible, which I'm not, and I do believe that's why I've got a lot of powers, because whatever my legs do, it goes through my stomach pretty quick and then through my chest. And like all I'm going to do is basically either deadlifts, depending on how that feels with my elbows, or just leg presses and then lat pull downs. Like just, and that's so much more. And you also don't even realize how much your right arm is pushing through impact. So even getting like tricep extensions, you know, and I don't want to like isolate one pec versus the other, but it really is just kind of everything. All of it's important.
Our trainer, like he's not even super big into stretching, because when Fred went to him, he kind of thought, oh, I don't have this very good shoulder mobility. And Ando was like, it's good enough. Like most of his athletes don't even really focus on stretching and mobility. They want to activate muscles instead of stretching them.
Well, I've been reading a lot more of that too lately, where I'm just like, I can't believe stretching doesn't help. Like, there's some things to me that as a 48-year-old have been hard for me to accept. The first time I ever heard like Joe Mayo or Michael Finney or some of these guys talking about there's no such thing as a fundamental. I'm like, there's got to be fundamentals. But then once you start understanding it, you're like, okay, these guys have put a lot of effort into this. They know what they're talking about. There is no fundamental. There are matchups. And that's a shift where it's like any grip can work. Any stance can work. We've always known that. You look at Bryce, and his left hand is literally so weak it's under the club. And what's a paradox is he's super weak, which means he has to play a draw. DJ and everyone, David Duvall, they're all super strong, which means they actually have to play a fade, which is so crazy that when we grip, well, that's a hooker's grip. Like, no, if you're any good. If you've got that strong of a grip, you better fade it. And it's just crazy, because so much I do believe of modern instruction, including what I teach, is just we finally have data to remove the mystical. And like, this is how it works. And the human body is so incredible. Without getting into a theological debate, I believe that we evolved from people where they were having to run around and throw all different kinds of rocks at shit in order to stay alive. The human body is really, really impressive if you tell it the right thing to do. I sat there in lessons in my 20s and sat there and spent hours trying to get the club face instead of right there. And it's like, Scott, maybe it's just the camera angle. Like, I just can't believe how much time is wasted on stuff that literally does not matter whatsoever. I mean, and that would be one of the bigger takeaways I think people can could take here with is like, make sure what you're working on matches your body.
Yeah.
And from there, oh shoot, I just realized it's 5:55. I got to get going in a second to my
Yeah.
daughter's play that we had talked about.
I know. So I guess to finish it off, one of my most surprising things when I started playing professional golf and doing more decade stuff, I was shocked by the whole, like, I was always told on par fives, you're supposed to lay up to a distance that you really like and you hit good shots from. And when I started talking to Fred about this stuff, he was like, no, you want to send it as close as you can. So that was like a really weird kind of like awakening for me. But I was just wondering, what is the thing that you tell people that shocks them the most often?
I mean, well, if I had to summarize it all in a nutshell, it's like, be as aggressive as you can off the tee, hit driver everywhere you can, get it up and around the green. Again, this is all, you know, within reason.
Yeah.
And then if you had to say conservative in the greens, that's fine. Middle of the green's not good advice either, though. That's often way too conservative.
Yeah.
And then be decent with speed putting. But it is that driver off the tee thing.
Hitting more drivers.
Yeah, the question is just always, okay, what's the alternative? 3-wood is basically never the play unless there is a crossing hazard that makes driver impossible.
Yeah.
So it's really either driver or long iron. And that's why you see a guy like Mickelson, his back setup is what I do actually believe the majority of the tour's back setup will be in 2 years or less.
Yeah.
The longest driver allowed, whatever they wind up doing with that. And then one of those mini drivers with more loft but an actual driver head, and then just a rocket, but a flat-faced rocket of a long iron. The bulge and roll isn't necessary at the tour level. You do hit those things materially more offline typically. And so if you get like a flat-faced Shrixon 785 is what I got, where I just bent it down to like 16 degrees and it just goes forever. But that's the only thing I'm using for it. That is off the tee on a tight hole. So I want something I can hit out there 260 or 70 and just know it's going straight. I got the mini driver to put back in my stance and I can draw that. I'll have the long driver up in my stance to cut that. And that's it.
That makes sense. Okay, well, tell everybody where they can see Decade or how they can get it. I know you have an app that's not technically out yet, but it's kind of out.
Yeah, so the app's out. The driving targets isn't supposed to be out. But, if you just Google Decade Golf at this point, you'll find everything you possibly need to at me. Playinglesson.com or birdiefire.com, and all kind of redirects to the same place. But, yeah, at this point, if you just search Decade Golf, you will find it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, if you don't like me, it's only going to get worse for the next few years, unfortunately, because of my college pipeline. We have 300 colleges using the product this year. So we're going to own PGA Tour University, which means I'm going to own the Korn Ferry Tour, which means I'm going to own the rookie class for the next 5 years. If you don't like me, it's not going to get better for you.
Get used to it. Yeah, and definitely don't follow you and Lou on Twitter if you don't like numbers. And
that's right.
Stuff. Very cool. Well, thank you for coming on. That was really
Absolutely. Cool. Absolutely. Thank you, too, for your time. And we'll do this again sometime when I don't have to go see Charlotte's Web.